Hey, everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRoushMedia.com, photo, video, digital media production. Today we are discussing the 2020 thriller film Alone. Alone is a 2020 American thriller film directed by John Hyams, the guy known for bringing a couple episodes of NYPD Blue, Chicago PD, ED, MED, all the DDs. It's like he's a television director that has made some serialized television, couple shorts, couple documentaries. He's kind of gone all over the place. And Matthias Olsson, I believe, is the writer who I believe is actually a percussionist, if this is the same person. I couldn't find any other information on them except for they were this person was probably into as a composer, or like he was a musical artist. The film stars Jules Wilcox as a young woman who tries to escape a homicidal stalker played by Mark Minshaka in the wilderness. It was released in the U.S. September 18th, 2020 by Magnet Releasing. Jessica. Okay, so let me talk about a little bit of the backstory before kind of going into it. This has got the music by Nima Farquhar, and the cinematography is by Federico Verdini, edited by Scott Roon and John Hyams. It was... I believe the distribution was a little bit interesting on this. I think it was released worldwide, or in the States at least, in theaters and on demand because of the COVID protocols. In 173 theaters, it only grossed slightly less than $200,000. It was the most rented film on Google Play and fourth on on Fandango now, and ninth on Apple TV. So eventually, I think most people have a pretty decent reviews on it. So let me see. Rotten Tomatoes says the film holds an approval rating of 95 with 55 reviews, average at about 7 out of 10. So yeah, I got to say that there's a number of things about this movie that there was a reason that I was watching it. I'm like 90% sure that the production of this was happening all throughout the pandemic. This movie feels like it was made during the pandemic, even though it's a limited amount of people and there's only a couple of locations. There's a handful of locations, but they're all not that heavily populated in a way. So what about this movie? Why are we talking about it today? Why even bring it up? Well, I did want to kind of get my thoughts out of the movie. Basically, it's a fun thriller film, I think, for the majority of the time. A little bit predictable here and there with regards of how it's probably going to end. A little bit contrived as well on some of the story elements that just kind of make things convenient of, these two people always bumping into each other. It's like, all right. But overall, it's a fun little thriller film. I think it's only PG-13. I don't have the actual... I think it is a PG-13 because it doesn't feel too violent in a way. It is kind of... difficult to watch in some places just with the the violence against this woman, but overall I thought it was a nice little romp, to say the least. Okay, so let me discuss. I will say casting. I think the writing's okay. It's not perfect. It gets the job done, is what it does. Feels like it's probably belongs on a straight to streaming movie. I would not feel like this is necessary to watch on the big screen. A couple things that happen toward the third act that make this a little bit less favorable as a piece of good writing. But other than that, I will say it's a fun romp. It's one of those it's one of those movies that you kind of want to watch with like a small group of people, and maybe have a couple drinks and take it easy and really just kind of kick it. And it's that kind of romp. Romp. It's that kind of film. I find that you'll probably have a better time watching this with somebody because of the ridiculousness. Oh, don't go downstairs. Oh, don't go do this. Don't go do that. It's all those things and emotions that you feel when you're watching a thriller film. It's got all of those. So, before hopping into the spoiler section, I probably would recommend this movie. I wouldn't go into too much detail about it. It does follow the same sort of cliches of a lot of these like stalkerish, being run off the road by a crazy dude, tropes. It does kind of go through that. Somehow he slashes a tire. I don't think that's a spoiler or anything like that. I feel like in every slasher movie, there's always, or some homicidal dude's always trying to slash the tires, and somehow he does. But anyways, this movie kind of follows that same path. I was entertained. I wasn't like floored by it. I don't know if I give it 95%, but I would say, yeah, I technically do fall in the 95% for saying that I would recommend it as a piece of entertainment. Not that it's like fundamental to too much of watching these movies. Like, this isn't going to make my top 10 of 2020 or anything like that. It definitely didn't make that, but I enjoyed it than a couple of the other movies that I watched in 2020. I enjoyed it more than like Mank. I thought Mank was a little bit too pretentious for me, and a way that I just need a little bit more fun. I know these are apples and oranges, kind of comparing the two, but just saying that I enjoyed this kind of schlocky B action thriller film more than I did a couple of the more quote unquote higher class films that came out in 2020. So, yes, I overall would recommend it with some small caveats that it's not perfect. It's mostly entertaining, and the writing's not it's not Shakespeare or anything like that, but it's a lot of fun. So, let's hop into the Patreon section where we are going to discuss the plot of this movie and kind of some more ins and outs of the film, of what we were thinking about it. Okay, so thank you for stopping by, listening, watching Lucky Dog Podcast, however you support. If you're on YouTube, please follow, subscribe, do what you need to do. Thumbs up, double thumbs up if you can. If you got like double accounts, you got double thumbs up, you already know. And so, I appreciate any way that you can support the Lucky Dog Podcast. Let me just say, we're on SoundCloud, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, Patreon. If you want to support us and get the podcast early, like everyone that's on Patreon is getting this podcast early. And we are going to have a lower tier that is going to allow people to have access to the podcast early, just for anybody that wants to support the podcast and listen early. This is all going to be for you. So, yes, thank you for listening, supporting Look It Up Podcast, however you can support. 5 stars on iTunes. Do the ratings, do the shares. Show your grandmother. Oh, this guy knows his stuff. He's talking about that new thriller Alone, 2020. It's the new John Himes joint. So, do what you need to do, and oh yeah, if you have not watched this movie, we are going to discuss this in spoilers. This is the spoiler section, the Patreon section, all the above. So here we go with the plot of Alone, and thank you all for watching, listening, Lug It All Podcast if you are a non-Patreon supporter. Thank you. Take it easy.